Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today I have Tyler Horsley with us. And I am excited for this conversation because I love networking. I love meeting new people. And Tyler doesn't know this, but I'm going to Podfest in a couple of weeks. So I will have already have been by the time this comes out in March. But I am excited to go just meet a whole bunch of other podcasters and talk podcasting. So this idea of networking just thrills me. So, Tyler, I'm so happy to have you with us today. And he's a CEO, he's an investor, business growth advisor, speaker, philanthropist, AI builder, investor. I mean, you kind of done it all, have you not, Tyler?
Well, I'm trying. Yeah, thanks for having me on, by the way. Yeah.
So, Tyler, just before we kind of get into, because I know you've got a lot of teaching and training today on how to create that loyal network. Especially since this is your first time on the Author to Authority
Yeah,
podcast, I would love just for you to share a few minutes about your story and how did you get into teaching and training and helping people create these amazing networks?
sure. Yeah, so brief story. Uh, I actually came from federal law enforcement. So I know it seems kind of strange or like a big leap and a jump to building your networks and digital marketing and business growth and more. But I actually had the opportunity to work with about 40,000 people a day. So yeah,
Wow.
pretty intense. And then prior to that, I grew up in restaurants, so I was able to serve, get to know people. But I think what's underneath that is being able to anticipate needs, learn how to kind of read people or develop EQ, whatever you want to call
Mhm.
that. And so that naturally translated after my federal law enforcement career to marketing and networking. And yeah, you already clarified, but networking from a people and network defines net worth sense, not an IT networking person. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, just that's a really brief version
Mhm.
of the story, but I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and relationships matter tremendously, even over or just as important as marketing knowledge. So yeah.
Mm. That is so cool. So how did you specifically start your company though? How did that come about to be?
Sure. So, yeah, because it is a leap, right? So I was working in basically military contracting space, keep it at that. And I've always kind of been a computer nerd, so I worked in logistics, trying to keep it broad on purpose. I apologize, but yeah, so kind of moving in. So I kind of had the affinity for why do things work that the way that they work, and I started moving into marketing. And I've always been entrepreneurial, so I had a full-time job at 12, been working ever since, even through middle school, high school, paid my way through college, did all the things, right? Checked all those boxes. And so these two worlds kind of collided. And I like the idea of exclusive knowledge and I like the idea of growing businesses. And so while I was at that organization, kind of call it off time, I started teaching myself SEO. And
Mhm.
so started learning, coding, went through Code Academy and just like all these DIY platforms that are available online. Now, just them making it available doesn't mean obviously that you're going to gain expertise. It takes a lot of time. But hey, fast forward 15 years, here I am. So yeah, so I started nuclear networking in a basement up by Boulder, Colorado, and grabbed one of my buddies who was also a nerd, but he was an electrical engineer at the time. And then another buddy who did business marketing and positioning. And we basically just started this. And it's the common story. I call it the Fight Club story, but genuinely sleeping on bunk beds in a basement for 4 nights a week, eating ramen, doing all the things, and just continued to grow, the organization. And that's actually how it started. So a lot of people don't know. So
That is so cool. So let me just ask you a couple of questions because,
sure.
most of the listeners are consultants, professionals, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs. You were working, you were growing this on the side, you were doing all these things. How did it make you feel? Because, I know for me, like journey in entrepreneurship has one of been little drop,
Yeah.
little drop, right?
Mhm.
And so I love to hear that part of the story because I think it encourages our listeners because sometimes, they look at people like you and, you've had, quite a level of success and things like that. But I love to hear a bit of the backstory because I think it encourages everyone to know that, hey, you are a normal person just like the
Yeah.
rest of us.
Yeah.
And, what are some of the things that you went through that will help our audience and encourage them in their journey?
Sure. So happy to go as deep as you'd like. And to your point, I do separate from business entirely to provide really short context, really being able to kind of dive deep and I call it like work on introspection is pretty important for people's growth. And so prepare, but um, as a filter to listen to this through, I've probably knocked 10 years off of my life with stress. So throwing
Mm.
that out there for everyone. Not easy at all in any way, felt like an uphill battle the entire time. It still feels like a battle. And what I listen to a neurologist and more on podcasts. Obviously love podcasts, and it's a good way to make use of windshield time, right? So if you're
Yes.
driving, you're stuck in traffic, learn, get involved, right? So anyway, I
You
listen to
get a
one.
whole university education while sitting in the
Yes,
car.
exactly, and it's cheaper. So, but I listened to a neurologist, and one of these individuals, he's kind of getting over into the science of motivation and more. But he said it's super important to fall in love with the journey, not the outcome. And I think that that's the differentiator because it's easy to look from the outside and see a lot of, hey, here's what this person has, or here's what they've achieved, and and then I'm going to replicate that in the first 20 failures or 100 because they never end. People give up. If you fall in love with the journey, and I know this sounds like parents, just get back on the bike. You got it. Have fun out there. One of those cheesy things, but it's true. You really have to reprogram your brain to just continue to try to get better. So specific to my story, we had a third business partner, and we essentially found out that one of the core deliverables that we had built the company on initially was not scalable. Meaning, if that one person wasn't here, we couldn't replicate it in a profitable way. By the way, we didn't have money. We didn't even get a loan. Like, we're bootstrapping this stuff out of a basement. And so making those hard decisions early, it's like, do I want a family? Do I want to continue to accelerate my career? Like, there's an opportunity cost to these decisions of like, how long am I going to really sprint at this to try to make this work before moving on to the next thing? And so we actually had to dismantle the first company that we started. It was very similar. It was a little twist on the name and moving forward. So basically now it's my partner, this other partner and I. And so we chose to niche down, which is just my experience. I won't tell anyone what to do, but like really focus on doing one or two things really well because the temptation when you're first starting is to just take it all because it's like, yes, it's money. I can pay my rent, and it's like, yes, but that's also not scalable. You're building a business where you might be the sauce is what we call it. And now if you want a vacation or stop working, or you don't want to take phone calls at 8 p.m. at night when you're with your family, you cannot be the center or the focus. And so like thinking and conceptualizing, how do I build a business that can run without me in the future? I can certainly play these parts now. One of the things I will recommend just to the listeners as a fun methodology is traction or EOS. That forced me to look at, there's all this scribbles behind me, but like look at your positions in your companies as seats. So there has to be a CEO, perhaps. There has to be someone doing the activities, somebody doing billing, this, that, and the other. Maybe you're sitting in all the seats, but at least it helps frame your mindset as, I need to replace myself in these seats. This is somebody else's work. So very, very hard time. Because our costs were so low, we were able to, quote unquote, make profitability within a quarter. But it's like, what's profitability? Paying for ramen. It certainly wasn't paying a full-time salary. A lot of struggles, I guess, with partnership dynamics as we've grown, funding, COVID, goodness, I don't even want to mention that on the show but it's like, It's like all these variables that you can't control, no matter how hard you try or work, they just happen to you. And so I'd say the thing that got me through to give people some like uplift is like network. Like, I know this is like not a cheesy, nuclear networking itself doesn't even sell networks, but network powers and network, or powers in proximity. Hang out or surround yourself with as many people possible who can pour into you, who have been there before, or who are also going through the same things. And to clarify, there are, hey, I have a business idea, and then there is, I'm actually doing it and this is really hard. Hang out with those people. There's no shortage of ideas, but like people who are actually in the grind, or people who have made it out, you'll save yourself so much pain. And that's the best thing I think I've learned throughout this entire process, is find people smarter than you are and just listen and ask questions.
I loved what you said, and I can totally relate. 2020, September 2020, I end up in emergency with my heart going 180 beats per minute. I had 3 episodes between September and April 2021. They did all these. I live in Canada, so they did all the tests. I don't pay anything for it. So they did all the tests.
Lucky.
They came back and they said, you have high blood pressure and way too much stress in your life.
Sure. Yeah.
They couldn't find anything wrong with my heart. So that was a huge wake-up call in my life, that I needed to structure my business and how I did things differently. I had the wonderful opportunity to spend some time with Brian Tracy and his son Michael a few years ago. And one of the things that, Michael and I talked about was just what you said, was that you want to build a business that can run without you.
Yep.
And that's, I'm not there yet. I am working towards that. In 2023, we're going to be working on making a huge chunk in that one. But I get it, because you do hit the point where the business is you-centered. And one of the things I got thinking about was, and somebody had talked to me about this, was, maybe one day you don't want to do this business anymore. How do you recoup your investment? If the business is you-centered, you can't sell it.
Right. Happy to dive into that if you want.
Well, normally I would, but we're already a good chunk of the way through. So I want to make sure we actually cover today's, but maybe we'll have you back again, because I think that would be a good conversation for you and I to have. But I want you to just switch gears, and because I know you've come prepared to talk about how to create a loyal network, and I want to make sure our listeners get what they're expecting today.
You got it. Yeah, happy to do so. And one caveat, just given your story, and thanks for sharing that too. I typically don't share this on podcasts. I told you I knocked 10 years of stress off my life. I had almost total adrenal failure. And seriously, look that up. Look up adrenal fatigue. A lot of founders out there.
Please. I know someone who completely burned out her adrenal gland and no longer has a functioning one.
Yep. Please take it seriously, because all that stress comes at a cost, and your body needs to take energy from somewhere. So I'll put a pin in that. And by the way, I'm okay. I'm here. Like, there is a way to reverse that, but you, to your point, Kim, definitely take it seriously. Don't wait until you're in a hospital to go, man, I should stop stressing, because we've all been there, and it's not worth the cost. And there are smarter ways to do things. And anyway, so with building your network and more. So again, there's a lot of phrases that I live by, and I know they're overused, but network defines net worth. It really does. The opportunity cost. And I'm telling you, everybody's got their own story. I grew up in a trailer in the Midwest, in the middle of nowhere. We did not have money. However, I did watch my dad work his butt off to do anything possible to pay bills. And I watched us go from a trailer to like a house. We finally got a house. And then we built our own house on a lake. And like, you don't notice that stuff when you're younger. But when you're older, you're like, whoa, what happened? And he decided, I'm going to do everything possible to succeed. And I'm sure that hopefully our family was his motivation too. But with that being said, if you can, so even if you come from that, or wherever you're at right now in life, it doesn't matter. if you can surround yourself with affluent people, it's a fancy term we learned for people with money who have actually worked really hard. Because if you're wanting to learn how to work really hard, that's what you want to surround yourself with. There's a lot of people with money maybe that didn't work hard for it. So that's another conversation. But so I joined groups like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. By the way, I get no commission. This is, but Entrepreneurs Organization, there's two segments of EO. One is, hey, I have a business that operates and we make $1 million a year, or we charge $1 million a year, gross $1 million a year. Doesn't mean that's your profit. Now you can join these groups and they help you do A, B, and C. Well, what if you don't have $1 million a year? Like, what if you're just starting? And so there's a group called EOA, and that's accelerators, and they solely exist to help you grow and get you over $1 million. So now you're being taught scaling up. You're being taught these methodologies, which I highly recommend. Scaling up is a cool methodology. EOS is a cool methodology. But building network, surrounding yourself with those people first and foremost is what I'd recommend. Secondarily, as a business offering, if your business offering can help other businesses, give it away for free. And I know that sounds really counterintuitive. This is Tim Ferriss 101, by the way, so I'm not going to take credit for it. He was popular many years ago and still is. But if you can go to businesses, I'll use an experience share here. We sold at that time just SEO and SEM. So we drove traffic for people. That was it. So I could go to other companies that provided websites and things that we didn't, but they were still kind of cohesive, or they were still mutually beneficial, right? We're serving the same audience. I'm like, look, can I do marketing for you for free? And you're always going to catch people off guard. Why would you give me something for free? Well, I have this really great analysis, or insert your loss leader here. You've got to have something of value you can give. I'd love to give this free marketing analysis to your customer base. Anyone you build a website for, are you okay with that? So I'm going to help you get more websites and grow your company. And all I'm asking in return is, once you're done with the website, send them my way. I'll give them this free presentation. They don't even need to buy. Doing that tripled my business in a year. And I kid you not, likely one of the main reasons that this company was successful. With more capital, you can do more things and spread your wings. But when you're really on a finite budget, if your value is your time and you can offer that for free, not to individual customers, I know this sounds weird, but to creators of customers, big partners that have 100 different customers themselves, you will rapidly accelerate your growth without ending up with adrenal failure. So yeah.
I just want to stop there for a second. And sure. I really want the listeners, if you kind of glazed over this section, go back and listen to it again, because what Tyler's sharing here is pure gold. And he's not saying you don't network with other individual people, but if you can find and network with those influencers, those people who have either A, big client bases, B, big networks, things like that, and you become valuable to them.
Yeah.
See, it's not about what you get from them. Mm-hmm. It's from what you give to them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important, because when you become valuable to those influencers, there's a law of reciprocity. At some point, they're going to want to give back to you. And I love that. That is pure gold, Tyler. And I hope the audience takes advantage of it.
Yeah, that patience too is important. That's worth saying. I've met some founders who are like, hey, I did what you said and went out and gave something away for free, and they asked what I could do for you, and I asked for 20 clients. And it's like, oh, like it's a catch-22, because we all need to eat, we need to pay bills, etc. Yeah. But what I would encourage people to do is try to genuinely and intentionally build relationship. It will come around, like Kim said, it will come around, but people can sense anxiousness. If that
desperation, eureka.
Yeah, and if they have quote unquote made it, or they're successful, they have no shortage of network of people trying to sell them stuff. And so if you're just there like, hey, I'd love to pour in, help your business. And sometimes the way you can get that back creatively, through, and I like Kim, you're the master. What did you put it like the master, like the wordsmith, basically the master of words. So here's a little, here's kind of a hint there. Would you mind grabbing a coffee with me? I'd love to ask you some questions and just give me some, some information about your experience and your journey. And then you can go to those people and say, okay, so my next thing, and please bring a pen and paper and write down, because their time is valuable and they've probably got a lot of great gold to share. Say, I'm really trying to grow my company. Do you have any recommendations? You know what I mean? Like if they have a customer base, they're like, oh, well, maybe I could. That's a greater way to kind of start that conversation versus the direct ask. So
yeah, or even if, like, let's say they have a specific client and you have that coffee chat, right? And yeah, pen and paper, because they're going to share some gold nuggets with you. Like people who are truly successful, and I'm not talking like greedy, selfish people, but people who are truly successful, they love to give their knowledge away. Like, I've met some famous people, Les Brown, Brian Tracy, things like that, and I've had opportunities to talk to them, and they just, like, you ask them a question, they answer it. And they're like, oh, that was just like, I can't believe you answered that question for me, right? And bring that pen and paper and write it down or record it, because you're going to want to go back and review it. But one thing I found that works really well is if you know one person that they know, and then don't make it a huge list, right? But if there's one person that you've really wanted to meet, right? And if you've been valuable, you could say to them, hey, listen, I know so-and-so. I'd really, if you found me valuable, would you be willing to introduce me? And a lot of times, if you've behaved properly, right? They'll make that introduction for you.
Yep, absolutely they will. And I really, since this is kind of built around authoring in books as well, you do not have because you do not ask. That's a wise phrase in a book. So I think that's good. Like, ask anybody, to your point, any of those questions that you're kind of looking for. You'd be surprised. It's kind of a way for them to give back to, and they've been through the struggle. Like, they get it. It's cool to sit, quote unquote, on the mountaintop, which I'm certainly not there. I don't know about you, Kim, but it's like, I'm like, what is the mountaintop? I'd
actually say maybe about a third of the way there.
Yeah. I don't even know if there is an end to this journey. It's like, that is the journey, is trying to constantly improve and grow. But a part of the way is like helping others who are capable, because I've certainly been given gold nuggets that have helped me. And I know those people, a lot of them like to give back. So it's good to ask.
Yeah. So we've probably got about like 7 minutes left, Tyler. And I know you are an author, but it's not really a book you want to talk about because it's not really related. But and that's okay. But I do have a couple of questions for you. So we don't have to specifically talk about the book, but what was the process like in writing that book? So usually a question that I like to ask, and the author to authority listeners already know what I'm going to ask you. What was the good, the bad, and the ugly about publishing that first book?
I think there's going to be a lot of styling in my experience share here, right? So this is my personal preference. This may not be the right way to do it at all, but my strength is not in writing, it's in speaking. And this is conversational. So this isn't a, you know what I mean? It's not, we're not doing a prepared PowerPoint anymore. But what I like to do is talk through concepts, not just factual, but really speak to, at least in my own experience, the holistic life that I live absolutely intertwines. And the simplest form that everybody can relate to, you have a terrible day at work and you come home, your family or your friends are going to notice. And so, like, you bring your stuff into other pieces of life. On the other hand, if your life is blowing up and then you go to work and try to act like everything's fine, people are going to notice. And so what I typically like to do is speak through either A, experience shares, B, interviews I've had with people far smarter than I am, and have that transcribed. And so there's a little bot just for freebies for people out there. Firefly is one of them that I like to use. It's an AI bot. I'm an AI nerd, so I don't know. There's ChatGPT, there's Firefly, there's all these things that you can use. Firefly specifically records each user and then transcribes that, and then you can kind of have that edited and kind of simmer it down If you remember, everybody remembers elementary school or middle school. They used to have us build contents. What's your book going to be about? Opening, chapter 1, chapter 2, and then what are the sub? You remember that? So that like organization of content's really key, especially for a lot of founders and visionaries like myself. I have ADHD. It's tend to work in my favor if you can master that. But also, can you imagine that in a book without any organization? It'd be everywhere. So transcribing software has been really key for me. I would also say like part of authoring as well, obviously listening to key influencers. I'd say the ugliest part about publishing that I went through was, man, if you've never done that, where do you start? You're certainly not, this is not open to constructive criticism, but this is not where you take your book and you walk into the publisher downtown New York and you're like, hey, would you consider carrying, you know what I mean? It's not that way. The good news is there's a lot of other things you can do. I personally went through Amazon's, you might know this, Kim. Oh, I'm forgetting, but I had to exclusively give my rights to the book that we published over to like Kindle and like their platforms for X amount of days. But the cool part, it was really low cost and more. We kind of bootstrapped it and duct taped it together. I wish that I might have gone with, a professional publishing route, just to be honest. And that's, be really candid, that's why I was like, hey Kim, let's not mention this book that I did. It's not something I'm super proud of. And yeah, it's in a totally different industry, but that's kind of the ugliest part. So had I had more insight into, hey, I have these great ideas, where do I take them once I have them? And then maybe that mentorship and guidance before either giving up or before selling my book down the river to like a duct tape platform. Anyway, that's probably the best experience share I have there. Yeah.
I wanted you to share that, Tyler, because sometimes things don't always go right the first time.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so we learned from it. When I wrote my first 3 or 4 books, I had no money. Okay. Like trying to put together $100 for a course was a lot for me.
Yep.
And so I Googled everything. I bought $5 and $10 courses that would answer, a specific question. The computer almost went out the window. I don't know how many times. And the only reason it didn't is because my husband's a computer guru and he probably would have divorced me. I came within a hair's breadth. I don't know how many times of not even writing the first book.
Yeah.
And there was so much I learned through the process that kind of prepared me. And at that point, I was in network marketing and that. So I was just writing books to help people. Publishing wasn't even a thought,
right.
Not even a dream, nothing. That didn't even come till years later.
Yeah.
And, sometimes those first books are not the greatest.
Right. Yep.
I look back at them sometimes and think, oh, I've got to get time to rewrite those because they're okay, but they're not great.
Yep.
But I think what's important is the fact that of what you learned through that experience. And one thing I've learned as a publisher, and I work with a lot of people like you, Tyler, is you've got the message, you've got the knowledge, you've got the teaching, but the biggest thing you said is how do you organize it? And I think that's where, having a publisher, having that good editor comes into play, because they can take all of those ideas, and put it into writing. And like you said, your strong point is speaking. And what most people don't realize is that they're usually stronger in one than the other.
Yeah.
I have interviewed people whose strength is more writing, and I can tell when I interview them.
Yeah.
If I got them to write everything out, it probably would have been beautiful. They were speaking it. It wasn't as strong, right? So you're usually stronger in one than the other.
Right.
And it's good to recognize that and go with your strengths. If your strength is in writing and you have to speak, especially if you're online, like doing a Zoom.
Yeah.
There's sometimes I've actually written it out and I put it on my computer screen below the camera. And sometimes I'm reading stuff and I've gotten so good at it. People don't even know I'm reading it.
Nice.
I've done whole speeches where I used word and I've
Yep.
got my thumb on the mouse and I'm teleprompting it.
There you go.
And I'm reading it as I go. And people didn't even know I was doing it, right? So it goes both ways. And it's good to recognize where your strength is. And if your strength is not in writing, it's in speaking, then like you said, you can speak out a whole lot of stuff, get it transcribed, and then have those good editors work with them. Now,
Yep.
at RTI Publishing, we do a lot of interviews, and sometimes our clients write and sometimes we interview them, whatever works for them. And
Yeah.
then we take it and we transform that right into well-written chapters that become a book. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that with us, Tyler. I really appreciate it. So before we go, because we're at the end here, two things. Tyler, I want to give you an opportunity to share one final thought. And then if people have been listening to this and they're like, I really need to connect with Tyler, do you have anything free you give away, and how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I do. So I must practice what I preach, right? It's like provide free value. But NukeNet or nuclearnetworking.com, that if you reference, obviously any contact forms, my direct email too, happy to provide that, tyler@nuclearnetworking.com. If you're a business owner, I'm happy to provide free education, free consultation around competitor deconstruct. So that's a mouthful, but before we, so I work in private equity now, before we go invest in other companies and start companies to begin with, I want to know what's the likelihood of success based on how many people are looking for what I'm selling, how competitive it is anyone else doing it, and is what they're doing working? I can provide all that for free. And so that would be the offer I can give to help reduce the leap of faith when you're jumping into entrepreneurship.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. This has been Kim Thompson-Pinder and Tyler Horsley on the Author to Authority podcast. Just want to encourage you to leave a review. If you've enjoyed this, that's a way that you can give thanks to any of the podcasts that you listen to. You don't know how much joy it brings to a podcast host when they see that there's a new review there. So if you've enjoyed it, please leave us a review, subscribe, connect with Tyler. Those are the things that make doing this podcast so enjoyable. So I want to wish everyone a great day, and we'll see you on the very next episode. Bye now.